Welcome to the Deep Dive, your shortcut to being well-informed. Today, we're taking a close look at a document that's causing quite a stir, really pushing for change in Kenya. Our mission, essentially, is to unpack the main arguments and, maybe more importantly, the call to action from the Kenya Wantam Notam movement, the KWM. It's all laid out in one of their key publications. The main source we're digging into is an article called Ruto's Government, a Total Disaster and the Betrayal of Kenya's Future. It came out via Village Action Online, dated July 31st, 2025. And you can actually find this right on the KWM's own website, which is wantamnotam.com. So I think of this deep dive as, well, a guide through how the KWM sees things right now in Kenya. We're going to carefully highlight their criticisms of the government and also look at the solutions they're putting forward for change. It's all based directly on what they've published. Okay, let's get into this document from the Kenya Wantam Notam movement and see, what we can learn about their vision for Kenya.
Yeah, and what strikes me right away, right from the start, is how the KWM frames its critique. It's not just like a policy paper. They present this whole situation as a deep betrayal of trust by the people in power. And that framing, that's not just a description, is it? It feels like a very deliberate choice. It's meant to hit hard emotionally, probably to turn general unhappiness into something more urgent, a call for real systemic change.
That's a really good point, a crucial distinction. And the KWM, they definitely start with a broad diagnosis, don't they? They basically declare Kenya is in a deep crisis, and they point the finger directly at William Ruto's government for it. The language they use is, well, it's blunt. They say Ruto and his crew, as they put it, have made a mess of things. And this mess, they argue, is causing real suffering for ordinary Kenyans, while, according to the movement, the leaders are just pocketing the wealth.
And it's not just the current government they criticize. The article also shows, well, a real sense of being let down by the ODM party. They mention ODM once had the potential to lead this country to greatness. That's quite a statement. But now, they say ODM is just a shell, that its promises have become lies. And it's the people who pay the price. So it speaks to this wider dissatisfaction with the political class, maybe.
Definitely seems that way. The document then kind of systematically goes through specific areas where the KWM sees this crisis playing out most clearly. They use some pretty vivid examples. They kick off with what they call, quite dramatically, the education crisis.
Yeah, and their claim there is that the education system is, and this is their phrase, being destroyed right before our eyes. They don't just leave it there, though. They point to specific things: underfunded schools, overworked teachers, and this worrying idea that students are being left behind. Their criticism is really sharp. They basically frame the government's failure to invest in education as appalling.
And here's where you see the KWM's maybe strategic thinking come through quite clearly. They highlight these really specific contradictions within the government to back up their claims, especially on education funding. So the article brings up Finance Minister Bangiri saying recently the government has no money to fund education services. Okay. But then Vice President Kindiki from the same government apparently made a public statement saying the opposite, that they are working hard to fund education and that they cannot afford to lose the gains made under Kibaki.
Right, and how the KWM interprets that difference is, I think, really key to their whole argument. They present it as a symptom of the bigger problem, incompetence and division, right inside the government. By shining a light on contradictions like that, things people can see, the KWM seems to be trying to weaken public trust in the government's unity, its credibility, which, is a pretty standard tactic for any movement trying to present itself as a better alternative. And those gains made under Kibaki, just for context, that usually refers to a period under the former president, Mwai Kibaki, where there were some pretty significant improvements in education funding and access. People remember that.
Okay, so from education, the KWM article then moves on to healthcare. And they describe that situation as one of critical neglect.
Yeah, the language here gets even starker, I'd say. It's designed to really hit home. The KWM states hospitals are failing, nurses are underpaid, and doctors are overworked. Pretty direct. And they follow that up by claiming the government has done absolutely nothing about this crisis. They paint this really grim picture, where ordinary Kenyans die in hospital corridors because they can't afford treatment.
That's a powerful image, very visceral. And the KWM, they position healthcare firmly as a basic human right. So for them, the government's failures aren't just poor management. They're a direct attack on the people of Kenya. They really use that emotional angle to ask, how can people put up with this? And why should leaders who haven't fixed healthcare remain in power?
And it's interesting, they don't just stick to social services. They connect this whole narrative of neglect to, well, the foundation of Kenya's economy, agriculture. They call it the struggling backbone.
Yes, exactly. The KWM really stresses that Kenya's farmers, who they praise as the backbone of this country, have been, in their words, ignored and left to struggle.
Yeah.
They argue the government promised help, but instead it's just allowed the sector to stagnate. And the specific complaints are pretty serious. Farmers overburdened with taxes, underpaid for their hard work, getting little to no support.
And if you look at the bigger picture, the KWM is highlighting the huge economic and social fallout when a key sector like agriculture feels neglected. Their conclusion, that money that should be helping farmers is instead being mismanaged, wasted, or diverted into the pockets of corrupt politicians. Onward. They flat out call this nothing short of a betrayal. They argue the very people feeding the nation are, quote, being punished by a government that refuses to lift them up. That's going to resonate in a country where agriculture is so central.
Definitely. And then finally, they turn to infrastructure. And again, the KWM document paints a pretty depressing picture. A country literally crumbling apart, they say.
Yeah, they talk about things people experience every day. Roads falling apart, disrepair, bridges being unsafe, public transport being a mess. Their overall claim is quite sweeping. Kenya is literally crumbling under the weight of neglect and mismanagement. And they're very critical of what they see as the government's priorities, saying it's too busy focusing on its own wealth and power to care about the basic needs of its citizens. They also throw in that the government is using outdated systems, outdated technology, and outdated ideas.
Their take on the infrastructure problems is, pretty grim. They see it as another symptom of a government that has no direction, no vision, and no understanding of what it means to govern. This lack of investment for them isn't just a failure, it's a disaster. While the leaders, in the KWM's view, just sit back, enjoy their wealth, and do absolutely nothing to fix the problems they've created.
Which brings us back sort of full circle to the KWM's view on the government's overall coherence, or lack thereof. They revisit that concern about the lack of unity, using those conflicting statements between the finance minister and the VP as Exhibit A, basically. They hammer home the idea that this erodes public trust, asking this really pointed question: how can we trust these leaders when they can't even agree on the basic facts? Their conclusion: this is a government divided, one that is incapable of leading the country forward.
So after laying all this out, what does it actually mean for you, the listener?
Well, the KWM isn't just diagnosing problems here. They're very clearly proposing a way forward, a really passionate call to action. They state very strongly, the people of Kenya deserve better. Absolutely. And their call is quite direct, quite urgent. It's time to rise up, they say. Time to demand accountability. Time to expose these politicians. And they offer a specific tool for change, using our votes to kick out of office the leaders they deem responsible. They even add, before one term ends. Now, the document doesn't spell out exactly what one term is, but it clearly signals some kind of political time frame or deadline, suggesting action needs to happen soon. And this really does raise that bigger question, doesn't it? In a democracy, what is the role of movements like the KWM? How did they work to, galvanize people to demand specific things, especially when people feel like the system isn't listening?
That's a critical question, absolutely, about how citizen action actually works. And the KWM certainly seems to believe the moment for that action is right now. They really emphasize this belief that if people don't act together immediately, then Kenya's future will just continue to be stolen from us by corrupt politicians who don't care about our future. The responsibility, they argue, lies squarely with us, the people, to take back what is rightfully ours.
And the KWM, through entities like Village Action Online and their website, wantemnotem.com, they are clearly pushing for this very active, very engaged citizenship. They're not advocating for people to just sit back and watch. They want direct, citizen-led involvement in holding leaders accountable and really shaping where the country goes next. It's a narrative fundamentally about empowerment through collective action.
And, well, that brings us towards the end of this particular deep dive. We spent some time really exploring the Kenya Wantem Notem movement's sharp criticisms of the Kenyan government. We've covered their perspective on what they see as a nation in crisis, pointing to perceived failures in major areas like education, healthcare, agriculture, and infrastructure. And we've also looked closely at their very passionate call for citizens to demand accountability and drive change, primarily through the power of the vote, all based on the arguments presented in their source document.
It's definitely a powerful statement from the KWM. You can see it strategically put together, laying out a broad critique, but also offering a clear path for the action they believe Kenyans need to take.
So as you think about everything we've discussed today, here's maybe a final thought to mull over. How do citizens, in any context really, effectively organize and keep movements like the Kenya One Town, No Town movement going, especially when trying to tackle these really deep-seated systemic problems? And maybe more fundamentally, what kind of real long-term impact can that kind of collective action actually have on a nation's path forward?